Welcome, it is Mitch. I am on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this bad boy up into something real special. Interact with the videos, like, dislike. If you want to, go ahead, interact, leave comments. It's all always appreciated. We've had plenty of Packers talk throughout the week. I thought today would be a good time to kind of look over the landscape of the NFC North as a whole. And point blank, matter of fact, this division looks loaded. Like right now, it is the best division in football. Will it be that? After Week 17, as we roll into the playoffs, we'll have to wait and see. But so far, the Vikings haven't lost, and they've got really good wins over San Francisco, Houston, and Green Bay. The Lions only have one loss, and the Bears and Packers are both sitting at 4-2. It is a stacked division. And outside of the wins and losses, the metrics back it up as well. The top 4 point differentials in the entire NFL all reside in the NFC North. Minnesota's plus 63 this year. First in the NFL. Detroit's plus 60. Chicago's plus 47. Green Bay is plus 41. Think about that too. Think about what I'm saying. Point differential. The top 4, not in the NFC. The top 4 in the entire NFL. All in the NFC North. In that order. Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, Green Bay. I mean, that's insane. And at this point, you could say it's a decent sample size. It's not, after 1 or 2 weeks where all 4 teams have started with a couple of cupcakes and blown them out. We're 6 weeks in. There's some notable wins on the resume for all these teams. And every single team in the North is in the top 4 in point differential. In a league that has the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 5-0, but only plus 33 in the point differential. A league that has the Texans, who will enter Lambeau Field on Sunday 5-1, but only plus 8 in the point differential. Top 4 in the NFC North. Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, Green Bay in that order. It's incredible. It goes to show it kind of shines more of a light on how dominant the NFC North has been so far this season. And there's more numbers. I mean, I could throw a lot more your way. The NFC North is the first division since the merger in 1970 to have every team in it have 4 or more wins through the first 6 weeks. You got to go all the way back to 1970, the merger, where there's been a division that through 6 weeks, each and every team has at least 4 wins. The division is on a combined 13-game win streak. And a lot of these teams in the division have done it with defense and takeaways. The Packers are tops in the NFL in takeaways. They have 17. Tied for second, Chicago and Minnesota. They both have 13. I mean, it is incredible. It's been a strong year so far for the NFC North. Green Bay has seen Minnesota. Minnesota meets Detroit this weekend. Chicago hasn't played anyone in the division. Their schedule's backloaded. The second half of the schedule, Chicago has a stretch where they go 3 straight weeks playing Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit. And then 3 of their last 4 to finish out the year are against Green Bay, Minnesota, and Detroit. And so the Bears will have some real tests coming up. I think they've been able to navigate and kind of skate by facing lesser competition. Not really their fault. Division looks loaded right now. It really does. When you're pulling up facts that date back to 1970 for the last time this happened was, and you have to go back to 1970, the division's doing something right. A lot of talent, a lot of great coaching, and some stacked rosters. I mean, the list can go on and on with the numbers. We're going to look at each team in the division entering Week 7. Let's start with Detroit. And you can't really start with the Lions without beginning with the Aidan Hutchinson injury. It's devastating. It's a brutal loss. I mean, obviously. And I do wonder how this alters the vibes that this Detroit defense had. Hutchinson wasn't only the NFL sack leader with 7.5 through 6 games. He was the pulse for that defense. He was the energy. He was the leader. And I know he's relatively young, and he's early on in his NFL career, but he's been so dominant. And there's stories coming out that I've read where he's already taken on a vocal leader type role for the defense for the Lions. And so you have one of the premier guys on the defensive line in the NFL. They hit the jackpot drafting Aidan Hutchinson a couple years ago, number 2 overall out of Michigan, keeping him in state. And he's been dominant. And so you lose the on-the-field production, but you also lose that locker room presence that's willing to go around and boost guys up when they need it, willing to help correct guys when he sees things that are going incorrectly. And Hutchinson can still be around the team, obviously, but it's different when he's not wearing the pads and doesn't have the helmet on. It just is. It just is. And so I wonder the vibes of this defense, how it looks, how it's going to shift, if it will be a seismic shift for Detroit's defense. You almost have to believe it will be. Like, imagine the 49ers losing Bosa. That's what this is for Detroit. Imagine the 49ers losing Bosa. Imagine the Steelers losing TJ Watt. That's what this injury for Aidan Hutchinson is and what it means to Detroit. The impact he had on this defense just cannot go undocumented. It was incredible. Entering this week, he leads the NFL in sacks with 7.5. But of course, this season now is done after the injury against Dallas. And you look at the sort of domino effect this could have on the rest of the defense. You talk about vibes. You talk about the on-field production that's missing. Aidan Hutchinson drew double teams often, which freed up other Lions defenders, other Lions pass rushers. He worked through double teams and plenty of extra attention at times when there were more than just two eyeballs fixated on Aidan Hutchinson. The Lions still have a sound defense. There's a strong foundation. I don't think this whole thing is going to cave in for Detroit. I don't see that happening, but it becomes a hell of a lot easier for opponents to prepare for Detroit, specifically the defense, knowing that Hutchinson's out. The picture just looks a lot different for the Lions. Brutal injury. Hate seeing it. You do. One of the premier sack artists in the NFL suffering in all likelihood, right, a season-ending injury in Week 6. And preparing for Detroit's defense now gets easier for the opposition. It does. There's no putting it lightly when it comes to that. The Lions can say what they want. They know the new reality. And that is, with Aidan Hutchinson out, it becomes easier to try to game plan as an offense for that Detroit defense. The dude was a havoc wrecker, and now he's on the sidelines. NFL sack leader so far was 7.5. As for the Lions, elsewhere, the win last week against Dallas, to me, I watched that game too, start to finish, in the 3:00 slot. That wasn't just another road win for Detroit. I didn't look at it that way. They were playing a Dallas team that started 1-2 and then got to 3-2. The Cowboys came in with some momentum. They came in with some confidence. They were playing on their home field in front of their home fans. And Detroit absolutely sucked the life out of the Cowboys. I mean, it was a dismantling in Jerry World. I don't care if you're the worst team in the NFL playing the best team in the NFL. 47-9 is embarrassing. And there aren't too many people, Dallas has its issues, right? And you can point at more than just one. But they aren't even close to being the worst team in the NFL. And on a 2-game win streak entering last week, you show up and lose on your home turf 47-9. That's humiliating. You talk about, they're going to say all the good things like, hey, it's a reality check. We got to look in the mirror. Dallas might not be good. Detroit sure as hell is really, really good. We know that. Detroit was so confident with that big lead last week. Who wouldn't be, right? They ran a hook and ladder with Penei Sewell. They're all-pro tackle. First-round pick out of Oregon a few years ago. They ran a hook and ladder with an offensive lineman. They had another offensive tackle, Dan Skipper, line up out wide at wide receiver on a couple of occasions. Literally, their tackle was lined up at receiver, ran a route on one play. Detroit was just having fun. They embarrassed the Cowboys. It's a really, really good Detroit team. Now you have to juggle that with the Hutchinson injury. And again, I say that new reality, knowing your best defensive player is out for the year. That's tough. I still think the Lions are real. This team can contend. I don't be surprised if they try adding something at the deadline in the form of an edge rusher. I'm not saying another wide receiver or a tight end or anything like that. The defensive side, where that gaping hole is now with Hutchinson out, don't be surprised if Detroit tries to add something there if they're not getting production in the next couple of weeks before the deadline comes and goes. But it's still, Hutchinson's out. That sucks for Detroit. Don't look at the Lions, though, and say it's a sinking ship now. Dan Campbell isn't going to let that happen. It's still a team that has an immense amount of talent. And they'll have a real good test this Sunday in Minnesota against the 5-0 Vikings, who are coming off a bye. Detroit's for real, even without Hutchinson. Mitch, I am on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. kind of doing an NFC North outlook entering Week 7. Let's go to the Vikings. I feel like a lot of people are waiting, and you know what? I might be guilty of this a little bit with the Vikings. I feel like a lot of people are waiting for the wheels to start coming off the bus for Minnesota, and it isn't happening. Like when they beat the Giants Week 1, I was like, okay, it's the Giants. And then they stack up wins against San Francisco and Houston. Granted, both of them at home. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's surprising. Didn't see the Vikings being 3-0. Then they go into Lambeau and win, and they're up, 28-7 at half against the Packers. And then they go to London and hold off Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, and they made Aaron Rodgers look pretty average, pretty below average. Rodgers had multiple picks. One was taken back for a touchdown. He was pressured early. He was pressured often by that Brian Flores chaotic defense that seems to always be in the right place at the right time, and those guys know their assignments to a T every single week. And all of a sudden, you look at the Vikings 5-0, and you're like, well, you can't call it a fluke because they haven't played, bottom of the barrel teams. They beat San Francisco, Houston, Green Bay, and the Jets 4 weeks in a row. Might just be a really good Minnesota team, which I don't think many people, myself included, charted at the beginning of the year. I didn't think the Vikings were going to be anything special. I thought this would be more of a retooling year, in a year that they would use to judge some of their players that they might be on the fence about, some of those younger guys, and see who's going to be part of the long-term plans for Minnesota. Instead, Sam Darnold, through 4 games, looked like an MVP candidate. Came back down to earth against the Jets, but Minnesota still won. Held off a late rally by New York. Who was it? Was it Gilmore? I think Gilmore had the interception of Rodgers in London with like less than 2 minutes left. Rodgers was looking for Mike Williams down the near side. Final score, I think, was 23-17. Vikings just keep finding a way. Darnold wasn't good against the Jets, like I said. Maybe the bye week came at a perfect time for Sam Darnold and the offense to kind of reset and sort of assess some of those mistakes. I will say, too, Minnesota's schedule after this week against Detroit kind of becomes awfully favorable for the Vikings. Some of their toughest games, I feel they've already had at Green Bay, the Niners, the Texans, a trip halfway across the globe to London to play the New York Jets. You look at Minnesota's schedule, it sets up pretty favorably after this one against Detroit, at least in my opinion. Because after this one against the Lions, listen to this. The Vikings play at the 1-win Rams, at home against the Colts, who to me are very average, at the 1-win Jacksonville Jaguars, at the 1-win Tennessee Titans, at Chicago, and then at home against the Cardinals and Falcons. Think about that. Playoffs start today. None of those teams are in on the upcoming schedule after this Detroit game for Minnesota. Rams have 1 win. Colts are 3-3. Jacksonville has 1 win. Titans have 1 win. Chicago's 4-2, but right now on the outside looking in. And then the Cardinals aren't a playoff team right now. Are the Falcons? The Falcons might be a playoff team, but they get them at home. Could be a Kirk Cousins revenge game. Point is, though, this schedule really fluffens up for Minnesota to keep stockpiling up wins as the season carries along. It's a cushy schedule for a 5-0 team that's kind of trying to just ride the wave. And when you talk about Minnesota riding the wave, they've been doing it with this defense. I've been saying this and hammering it home since before kickoff of Week 1. I thought this Vikings defense, bringing back a lot of the same pieces from a year ago, would be a hell of a lot better year 2 in Brian Flores' system. It's such a unique system that you don't see many defensive coordinators run. Brian Flores does his own thing. He kind of goes rogue with his defensive game plan. And I thought the familiarity and a lot of these Vikings defenders having 1 year of it under their belt would start to have way more comfortability in year 2. And my, oh my, not even I thought the Vikings defense would be this good, because when you look around the landscape of it, Danielle Hunter's gone. He's in Houston. They don't have a Bosa, a TJ Watt, and Aidan Hutchinson. They've got Harrison Smith, who's kind of the brains of the operation. But Harrison Smith's not even in the prime of his career anymore. He's on the back nine. He's putting on 16, getting ready to tee off on 17 in terms of where he's at in his career. He might even be in the fairway on 17, getting ready to pitch onto the green and then go to 18. Harrison Smith is the brains, and they have good pieces. Harrison Phillips, pace is pretty good. They use a first-round pick on a defender, along with taking J.J. McCarthy at quarterback. But there's no, at this moment, superstar. Maybe Turner, their first-round pick, develops into that, but it's just a great scheme that Brian Flores has. And the Vikings defense constantly shows up. Minnesota is second in blitz percentage at 41%. Brian Flores' aggressiveness, opportunistic football defensively, those are the names of the game when you're playing for Brian Flores. A 41% blitz percentage. They're second in quarterback hurry percentage at 13.2. They're third in sacks with 20, and they've played one less game than the two teams above them. Think about that. They're third in sacks, and the two teams above them and the 7 below them have all played one more game because the Vikings just had their bye week. Minnesota's first in QB pressure percentage at 32.6, and they've played the likes of San Francisco, Houston, Green Bay. Good quarterbacks, even Rodgers. Throw him into the mix, obviously. Brian Flores, he's locked in. And I think most importantly, he has a group that's buying into his every word. Because Flores could have a good scheme, but if the players aren't buying it after year one last season when they struggled at times, we saw what Green Bay did on New Year's week, and they went into Minnesota, eliminated Minnesota from playoff contention. Green Bay kept their own hopes alive, and it was in large part due to Jordan Love and the offense absolutely shredding Brian Flores' defense. But these guys stuck with it in the offseason, and it is paying off handsomely for the Vikings. Justin Jefferson's going to get a lot of the headlines. The resurgent season so far for Sam Darnold, who was an afterthought for so many years after he fluttered in New York with the Jets. That's been a big storyline. The defense deserves a hell of a lot of credit for Minnesota's 5-0 start. Numbers back it up. And I don't think Sam Darnold has to be Superman for this team to succeed. If they want to win a Super Bowl, I think Sam Darnold does have to play pretty damn well, even with a really good defense and really good offensive weapons, because I've trained my mind to believe that there aren't going to be... The Nick Foles and Philly thing was an outlier. It's not going to become the norm, where the backup quarterback comes in, or a quarterback who some would regard as a starter like Sam Darnold, others would say he's a backup at the NFL, can lead your team to the promised land. The Nick Foles Philly thing was truly it was a good team. Carson Wentz was playing at an MVP level before he got hurt that year, but what Foles did was out of this world, and it was rare and not a common occurrence in the NFL. But I think for this team to just succeed and sort of just, like I said, ride that wave, I don't think Sam Darnold has to be Superman. And maybe that's clearly evident to some of you, but I thought it was worth mentioning. He can't be the Sam Darnold of old. He can't be the Sam Darnold we saw against the Jets that went 14 for 31 with no touchdowns and a silly interception on an overthrow. He can't be that Sam Darnold. He's got to be higher than that, but doesn't have to be Superman, doesn't have to be an MVP of the league for this team to succeed and really strike some fear into the opposition. Big one this Sunday, Detroit in Minnesota against the Vikings. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Looking over the landscape of the NFC North, we got to finish up with the Chicago Bears. When I typically do these videos, we don't have much Packers talk because we've done the Packers talk already throughout the week. Of course, they have the big one on Sunday as well against Houston, CJ Stroud and company coming to town. The Bears had finishing up with Chicago, the Bears to me had a pivot point in the season, a clear pivot point. They started 1-2, had a miserable loss to Indianapolis in Week 3 where the offensive line looked pitiful. There was a viral screenshot going around. The Bears had it 4th and goal at the 1 or inside the 1, and instead of going under center, they went, I think, from the pistol. It was either the pistol or the gun. They ran a speed option to the near side, and Caleb Williams spearheaded, obviously, that speed option. And there was a screenshot of 4 or 5 of the offensive linemen on their ass on the turf. Indianapolis sniffed it out, buried the offensive line, buried Caleb Williams and company, forced the turnover on downs, and beat Chicago. After that game, to me at least, was a very clear pivot point in the season for Chicago. Because they could have said, this ain't it. O-line isn't good. We got a good defense. We got a rookie quarterback who hasn't been finding solutions maybe as quickly as we thought he would. This could get ugly. And, they don't get an extra pat on the back for winning against bottom-of-the-barrel teams the last 3 weeks, but all wins count the same. It's all worth one when you look at the standings and when you look at a team's record. And the Bears are 4-2 entering the bye. And like I talked about the vibes with the Lions, and you wonder where they're at defensively after Aidan Hutchinson goes out for the year. They're going to try to rally and keep everything at a high. easier said than done when you lose your premier talent on that side of the ball. The vibes for the Bears have to be pretty high entering the bye week. After 3 weeks, it was, oh no. And then they rip off 3 straight wins, and they're sitting at 4-2. And I think if you ask anyone in that building before the year, hey, entering the bye, you can be 4-2. I would imagine Chicago unanimously would sign up for that. I would think, right? If you told them beforehand, you could be 4-2 heading into your bye week, they probably sign on the dotted line. They say, where do we sign? Caleb Williams has looked better and better as the weeks carry along. I think for a rookie quarterback, to me, that's huge. Like, not a rookie quarterback that starts so fast and then plateaus, or a rookie quarterback who's just riding a roller coaster of, really high highs and really low lows. And it was mostly lows in the beginning for Caleb Williams, but now he's on an upward trajectory and he's ascending and he is getting better. And I'll stick with that card that I pulled early in the year. I said I do think Caleb Williams is going to be a really, really good starting quarterback in the NFL. And I know a lot of Packer fans don't want to hear that, and you might cringe when I say it, but I do. I think Caleb Williams will end up being the real deal for them. They have a legit defense. Like, the defense, they know they're legit. And so I think that helps a rookie quarterback when you have plenty of weapons on offense. The offensive line seems to be figuring it out slowly but surely. But Caleb Williams entered the building knowing I got a defense that will be able to bail out some mistakes that I'll probably make as a rookie and even a second, third-year starting quarterback. Chicago's defense is as good as advertised. My only moment of pause with Chicago right now, outside of playing in the NFC North where it's a gauntlet, and I don't think they're as finished of a product as Detroit or Green Bay or even Minnesota, because the Bears haven't really seen success in quite a few years, and they're trying to build this thing up. They built it for Caleb Williams to have as much success as a rookie quarterback could possibly have in his first year. That's why they went out and drafted Rome Odunze. That's why they went out and traded for Keenan Allen. That's why they got DJ Moore a couple of years ago, the last gasp for Justin Fields in that era, and now transitioning to Caleb Williams. But I don't think they're as polished of a product as the other teams in the NFC North, which could obviously come into play when the Bears finish up and they have 6 games, all 6 left in the division. My other moment of pause is, again, it's not their fault, but all 4 of their wins have come against teams who only have a single win this year, and I do think that matters. Like, I brought it up with Green Bay. Green Bay hasn't beaten a team over 500 this year. They have a big opportunity to change that narrative on Sunday against a 5-1 Houston team. But the Bears, 4 wins, all of them against teams who are 1-4 or 1-5, and it's not their problem. They don't craft the schedule, but I do wonder, in a division that is clearly loaded, and the Bears haven't played one division game yet, how does this look in December? That's my big question with Chicago. How does this look in December when you end up having 3 in a row starting in the middle of November, where it's Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota, or Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit? I don't know the order of it, but you have 3 straight games in the division, and 3 of your last 4 are in the division. Like, consider this for Chicago. After the bye week, in order, they will play the Commanders, the Cardinals, and the Patriots. Jane Daniels having a phenomenal rookie season. That'll be a fun matchup between the top 2 quarterbacks drafted in this past April's draft. Then you get the Cardinals, who are frisky, but that's a winnable game. Then you get New England, who's starting another first-round quarterback taken this past April in Drake May. And those are the 3 coming out of the bye for Chicago: Washington, Arizona, New England. After that, it's Packers, Vikings, Lions, and then San Francisco. That's a gauntlet. Those are 4 teams who, right now, I think most would say expect to be in the playoffs. Yes, 3 from the NFC North. Lions, Vikings, Packers probably all think they'll be playoff teams. San Francisco certainly does as well. So the Bears have this little gap where it's like, man, if we really want to vie for one of these wild card spots, we're going to have to do some damage against Washington, Arizona, New England. Because after that, it's Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, San Francisco. And then they finish in order: Vikings, Lions, at Seattle, Green Bay. I mean, that's a brutal, brutal finish to the schedule. We will find out everything we need to know about the Bears starting in the middle of November when that schedule starts to beef up. Everything we need to know about Chicago, we will figure out then. Right now, it's a 4-2 team who clearly is building plenty of confidence, has a really good defense, a defensive-minded head coach, a rookie quarterback who's solving the puzzle slowly but surely, week by week. He's putting the pieces together. He has an array of talent to work with on the offensive side. I mentioned the wide receivers. I didn't even mention how good Cole Kmet's been the past couple of weeks, how incredible DeAndre Swift has been at running back. You know, it's amazing what a running back can do when he gets the ball and he isn't immediately greeted by two defensive players. That was kind of the tail of the tape for DeAndre Swift the first couple of weeks. The past two, the offensive line has been better for Chicago, and it has paved holes for Swift in the ground game, and he's looked really good in the last two. And so you can see the gears turning in Chicago, and they feel really good about where they're at entering this bye week. But we will find everything out we need to know about them starting in the middle of November. But right now, like 4-2 at the bye, do they sign up for that? Yes, they absolutely do. So that's kind of where we're at in the NFC North. And then I said, of course, Packers-Texans play on Sunday. You can check out the Final Thoughts video that was posted earlier in the week. It is Mitch. I am on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you next time.